The world is changing, fast, dangerous, and divided. And in the middle of it all, something unexpected just happened. A trade war over eggs. Yes, eggs, one of the simplest symbols of everyday life, have become the latest weapon in a growing economic standoff between Canada and the United States. It started quietly. A massive shipment of American eggs arrived at Canadian ports, only to be rejected. The official reason? Strict quality and pricing standards. But behind that diplomatic language lies a far deeper story, one of power, pride, and payback. For decades, Canada and the U.S. shared one of the world's closest economic bonds. But now, that relationship is cracking. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has drawn a line in the sand, signaling that Canada won't play by Washington's rules anymore. Analysts are calling it the beginning of the silent trade war of 2026, a conflict not fought with soldiers or missiles, but with tariffs, embargoes, and quiet acts of defiance. The question is no longer about eggs. It's about who truly controls the future of North American trade. It began with one decision, a bold, risky, and calculated move from Prime Minister Mark Carney. When U.S. exporters tried to flood Canadian markets with low-priced eggs, Carney said, "Enough." He accused American producers of agricultural dumping, selling goods below cost just to undercut Canadian farmers. For Carney, this wasn't about eggs. It was about sovereignty. He declared that Canada would no longer be bullied by bigger economies. Behind closed doors, officials in Ottawa stood firm. They knew the risks: economic retaliation, political backlash, and trade pressure from Washington. But Carney had a point to prove: that a nation's food supply is its backbone. As Canadian ports shut their doors to U.S. shipments, the move sent shockwaves through the agricultural sector. Farmers cheered, markets tensed, and the world took notice. Carney's calm words carried a powerful undertone, a message that echoed far beyond Ottawa. We protect our producers, not foreign profits. What looked like a simple rejection quickly became a symbol of resistance. Canada, for the first time in decades, had stood up and said, "We won't fold." Inside the White House, chaos erupted. Reports say former President Donald Trump was livid, slamming his desk and demanding answers. "How could Canada do this?" he shouted, calling the rejection a national embarrassment. Within hours, an emergency meeting was called. Trade advisors, agricultural lobbyists, and senators from farm states packed into conference rooms, scrambling to assess the damage. Millions of dollars in exports were now frozen. Warehouses overflowed with unsold eggs. Farmers were furious, accusing Ottawa of betrayal and Washington of weakness. Trump's team framed it as a personal insult, a direct challenge to America's dominance in North American trade. But deep inside Washington, some quietly admitted Canada's move wasn't baseless. The U.S. had indeed been exporting surplus goods at cut-rate prices to offset domestic overproduction. Carney's bold stand had exposed a hidden truth: that America's trade power wasn't as invincible as it seemed. As reporters flooded the airwaves and social media erupted, one thing became clear. This was more than just economics. It was a blow to national pride, and Trump, known for his aggressive style, wasn't about to let it go unanswered. In Washington, the mood was anything but calm. The moment Canada's ban hit the news, the White House went into crisis mode. Former President Donald Trump, known for his fiery reactions, was reportedly furious. He slammed his desk, calling the decision a national embarrassment. Within hours, emergency briefings were underway. The Department of Agriculture warned of tens of millions in immediate losses. Farmers from Iowa to Texas panicked as export deals collapsed overnight. Egg warehouses overflowed, prices tumbled. The U.S. agricultural lobby demanded retaliation. Trump publicly accused Carney of weaponizing agriculture, using trade policy as an act of aggression. But behind the scenes, even some U.S. economists quietly admitted that Canada had a point. Overproduction, political infighting, and poor tariff planning had created this mess long before Ottawa pushed back. Still, Washington needed a villain, and Canada was the easiest one to blame. The U.S. media called it Egggate. But for many in Ottawa, it was something deeper. The moment when America realized its economic dominance was no longer unquestioned. Within weeks, the dispute began shaking the foundations of global trade. Mexico, France, and several European partners voiced support for Canada's right to regulate its markets. They saw Ottawa's move as a stand for fairness, a refusal to be flooded with cheap, underpriced imports. Suddenly, Washington found itself isolated. Stock markets wobbled. Trade alliances hesitated. Meanwhile, Canada's local economy showed surprising strength. Farmers who once feared collapse now thrived under domestic demand. Carney's government poured funds into food independence and supply chain resilience, making the crisis look like a calculated opportunity. Analysts began calling it the egg shock, a moment when Canada transformed defense into dominance. Even environmental advocates stepped in, arguing that local production reduced emissions and strengthened sustainability. In a world tired of overreach and economic bullying, Canada's defiance resonated. The message was spreading far beyond North America. Small nations, when united by principle, could rewrite the global playbook. By spring 2026, it was clear this wasn't just a trade war anymore. It had become a philosophical conflict between dominance and dignity. For the U.S., it was about control, maintaining its status as the region's economic superpower. For Canada, it was about survival and sovereignty. Political analysts compared Carney to historical figures who had stood their ground against overwhelming odds. Every public statement he made was measured, calculated, and deliberate. A reminder that calm strength often speaks louder than anger. Meanwhile, the American media painted Carney as a cold strategist, accusing him of orchestrating an anti-U.S. movement across global markets. But in Canada, he was celebrated as the leader who finally broke the habit of dependence. What began as an argument over agriculture had evolved into a test of national will, a clash between two visions of global power. And the more Trump shouted, the more Carney's quiet defiance echoed around the world. As 2026 unfolded, the egg war came to symbolize something far greater. It wasn't just about products, profits, or politics. It was about principles. The world realized that the global economy was no longer a one-sided game. For decades, Washington's voice dominated every trade table. But now, Canada had shown that courage, not size, defines true strength. The shockwaves from this standoff reached far beyond North America. Developing nations began questioning their own dependency on powerful economies. Economists called it the Carney Doctrine, the belief that protecting local industries is not isolationism, but self-respect. Trump's anger still dominates headlines, but Carney's legacy endures as a lesson in restraint, resilience, and resolve. The egg war may fade from memory, but its message won't. In global politics, the loudest voice isn't always the strongest. Sometimes, it's the one that stays calm and refuses to back down. For more powerful world insights, subscribe, like, and share. Only on The Macrosphere.